What's going on, peeps? Mastermind here. So it is now official. The Golden State Warriors are the greatest NBA regular season basketball team of all time. Now that is statistically speaking. We all have our own opinions on the matter, and you may think it might be the Lakers, or you may think it's Chicago, or whatever it is. But statistically speaking, they are at the top. They are #1 now. And I know that's hard for some people to swallow, especially, you think Golden State, you don't think of them as one of these elite franchises that you do like the Lakers or the Celtics or the Knicks or the Bulls or even San Antonio or Miami in recent years. So it's kind of hard for a lot of people to visualize the Golden State Warriors, and then they don't really have a high flyer that's just dunking over everybody. When you look at this, a lot of people tend to not give them the credit, but you got to give them credit, even if the optics seem a little bit different. Steph Curry isn't your typical franchise looking player or style of player, and Golden State isn't really your typical franchise type of team that people look at as great dynasties. But guess what? Here they are. Now, before I continue and give the rest of my opinion on this, the footage that you're looking at here is actually just footage of a highlight reel that I did with Steph Curry earlier with NBA 2K16, and I also did one for Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, so you'll see some of that in a moment as well. So the conversation now is going to be shifting to, are the Golden State Warriors better or as good as the Chicago Bulls? And in my personal opinion, again, now I'm not speaking as far as statistics are concerned, I think the Bulls were better. The Chicago Bulls, I think, all around were much better than the Golden State Warriors. I also think that the league back in the 90s was a lot stronger and a lot tougher than what the league is now. That is not to put down any of the current generation athletes that are playing in the league right now. I'm sure if Steph Curry and LeBron James were playing in the 90s, they would have been amazing players just like they are now. But if they were playing in the 90s or in the 80s, they would have had to deal with hand checks. They would have had to deal with harder fouls. They would have had to deal with overall a lot more physicality than what they do today. I mean, if you think about, back then you had the Mutombos, the Ewings, the Oakleys, the Davis brothers in Indiana. You had Alonzo Mourning, Charles Barkley, Karl Malone, Kevin Willis. If you even think about the point guards, Gary Payton. I mean, I love Steph Curry. I think he's the best player in the league. He's my favorite player to watch. One of my favorite players actually of all time. But I don't think he'd be jacking up those kind of threes at the rate that he's doing if he was matched up against a Gary Payton or a Scottie Pippen. I just don't see that happening. Would Steph Curry still be an elite player, possibly even the best player in the league? Absolutely. I'm not trying to take away anything from the man's talent whatsoever, but it would be a lot more difficult for him to be able to sustain that level of dominance throughout an entire duration of an NBA game, let alone the duration of an NBA season. Now, if we flip it and we say, okay, well, what if the Bulls were playing in this current era? How would they fare off? And obviously, because the league is softer and because the players aren't as physical as what they used to be, I think Michael Jordan would, and I'm not even exaggerating when I say this, I think he would probably average or aim to average about 40 to 45 points a game, and I think he'd be able to do it as well. And if you take Scottie Pippen, one of the big criticisms that Scottie Pippen has had throughout his career is that he was kind of a softer player. Now, I don't agree with that. I think he was a pretty tough player, a very durable player. In fact, overall, I think he's the most complete player I've ever seen, but that's a debate for another time. He's my favorite player of all time. But I think he would fare off even better in the league like today because he was so athletic, he was so long, he was so fast, and I think the way the game is played now would actually suit him a lot more. If you think about LeBron James, right? That man is at his prime. He's a freight train. He runs in and he's either going to pass it or he's going to dunk it. But either way, as he's going in, he's probably going to knock down a couple of people on the way, or they're going to just step aside because they don't want to be knocked down. In the 90s, there's no way LeBron James would have been that kind of player because he would have had to contest with the Charles Oakleys and the Anthony Masons and the Davis brothers and the Alonzo Mournings. There's no way he would have just been running willy-nilly down the lane and slamming it down. It wouldn't have happened. So when you think about the way the game is played now and you consider that LeBron James is more of a physical player, Scottie Pippen's more of a finesse player, but if you think about LeBron James, today in this game, he relies a lot more on his physicality, on his strength. And of course that was a factor back in the 90s, but he wouldn't have had that big of an advantage that he does now. where Scottie Pippen is more of the finesse guy and the finesse player, he was at a disadvantage back then because of the physicality. So just imagine the advantages that a Steph Curry and a Klay Thompson have today. And that makes a huge difference. Now, if we go into defense, defensively, Chicago wasn't like the New York Knicks or the Indiana Pacers or any of those teams. They relied much more on their athleticism and their length. They were more of a pressure type of defense than a physical kind of defense. So they would really thrive in the league today. You have Scottie Pippen with his long arms, Michael Jordan with his ability to read the defense. You have Dennis Rodman with his ability to rebound the ball. It would be really, really dominating for the Chicago Bulls in my mind. Again, more of a finesse defense, but for the exception of maybe Dennis Rodman and Ron Harper, they can really, get under your skin. But for the most part, the two players that ran the defense was Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan. And Scottie Pippen was a threat. If you threw the ball anywhere, whether it was in the post or to even go back outside, he was a threat to steal the ball or disrupt what you were trying to do because of his length and because of his speed and anticipation. So he totally owned the passing lanes. And it really boils down to the defense. If you compare the two teams, defensively, Golden State just doesn't match up with Chicago in any way. Offensively, I think Chicago would be even more dominant today than they were back then. So when you compare the two teams, yes, it's kind of unfair to compare the two different eras because we really don't know for sure. But if you look at the strengths and the weaknesses of both teams, it's really hard to argue the fact that Golden State is a superior team. Just the things that I laid out as far as Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan and their offensive ability and their defensive ability as a team. The only thing Chicago was really lacking was a shot blocker, like a dominant shot blocker. But they had some pretty decent centers that did a decent job, and the reason why they were there was for the Shaquille O'Neals and the Patrick Ewings, and at the end of the day, that's probably the only weakness, and by today's standards, they'd probably be pretty dominant as far as, shot blocking ability is concerned. And let me just mention, Dennis Rodman in any era at any time is an absolute nightmare for the opposition. I don't know how Golden State or any team in the league today deals with that guy. Between his on-the-court antics, his ability to get under your skin, his ability to rebound, his ability to defend, he would be an absolute terror for anyone. And that includes LeBron James. If you think he chokes now and you think he gets these cramps and all these bad things happen at the worst times and he doesn't deliver when he needs to all the time, imagine if LeBron had to go up against that guy. He'd be crying. Now, as far as Golden State is concerned, when they struggle, and we might see it in the playoffs, it's going to be because they're not shooting well. They can't really rely on their defense the way Chicago does. If Chicago had a bad shooting game, they just relied on their defense and they still shut down the opponent and won the game. So I think that is really the biggest difference that I see between the two teams. But this is all hypothetical. We'll never know for sure, and that's what makes this whole thing very interesting and fun for some of us. I mean, some people can't handle the conversation and they get mad, but I always grew up debating and talking about movies, basketball, boxing, hip-hop, and video games, and even now I talk about politics, and I love this stuff, but for some people it's a difficult conversation and they get all crazy and upset, and I'm sure I might see some of that in the comments because everyone has an opinion. But let's just try to avoid the personal attacks. Anyway, that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give me a big thumbs up, and if you got something to say, leave a comment down below, and of course don't forget to share and subscribe. Thanks once again for watching. Mastermind out.